Hello guys, welcome back to another video. Now in this video I'm going to be showing you how to remove the swirl flaps on the BMW M47 and the M57 as well. Now the process for both of these engines is pretty much the exact same. The only difference is the M47 is the 4-cylinder and the M57 is the 6-cylinder. Now then, without further ado, let's get the car inside and let's get cracking. Okay then, so here we go. You can see we have an M47 here in a E46 chassis. Now this process is going to be slightly different depending on which chassis you have. So if you have an E46, an E90, an E60, E53, whatever chassis you have, the process is going to be slightly different, but the main parts are going to be the exact same. Now then, the first thing we need to do, because we need to gain access to the intake manifold itself, which is underneath the engine cover, we need to go ahead and remove both of the engine covers and then the cowling or cabin air filter box. So let's do that first. So then, in my case, because this is a E46 chassis, I'm going to go ahead and remove this cover at the front here, just held in by these two little push rivets. Once they're both removed, you should then be able to pull this off. Yeah. And then the main engine cover itself should be held in by 4 5mm Allen bolts, and then possibly one smaller 4mm Allen bolt down here over the power steering fluid reservoir. The engine cover itself should lift up then. Now that we have the main engine cover removed, then I thought I'd just show you a quick tip if you are unsure whether or not your engine actually has swirl flaps in it, or if you're unsure if they've been blanked already before. If you take a look down here in between the EGR and the intake manifold, if you see, let me see if I can show you, this thing there, that is one of the swirl flaps, and there is also a rod that attaches to that swirl flap as well. So yes, you can see the swirl flaps without even removing your intake manifold. So if you have blanks in place there, there's a good chance, well, it's obvious that your swirl flaps have already been removed. So we can now confirm that we have them still in place, so we are going to proceed with the job. And now I'm going to remove the cabin air filter box slash scuttle panel. So this one is just held in by these 3 little twist tabs. The trim piece can be removed, it slides out, and along with the cabin air filter. And this box is held in by 4 T30 screws, so we'll get them removed. And we just need to unclip this wire in here from the front. There we are. Now this entire box should pull out. Next thing to do then is remove this rear engine cover, which is just held in by 2 bolts. I'm also going to remove this back panel here as well. It's just held in by 2 T30 bolts. There we are. And with that removed, you should be able to fully remove this rear engine cover. Next thing I'm going to do then, just to give us a little bit better access, is actually unbolt the positive cables here, and also remove this vacuum hose here from this bracket, and then just fold it out of the way, and then the positive cable should be able to come over to one side. Then we should be able to see the intake manifold a little bit better, and it's just going to make it easier to remove the thing. So as you can see then, I've disconnected the positive cables from this point here. Just fold it over to the one side. We just have this vacuum hose here. I'm not going to go ahead and disconnect, we can just leave that out of the way to remove this thing. Now next thing I'm going to do then is start unplugging the injectors and unscrew it from the intake manifold itself, and then we will just fold all that over as well. Next thing I'm going to do then is remove the EGR from the intake manifold and unclip this cable here as well for the intake air temperature sensor. I'm going to disconnect the map sensor at the back here. Let's pull the electrical connector off. And now I'm going to unbolt the dipstick from the intake manifold. It's just held in by one 10mm bolt. There we are then, that's that bolt removed. I can just push over to one side. And now it's time to start unbolting the intake manifold itself. So we have some 10mm bolts along the top, and then we have 11mm nuts along the bottom here. And with all of the bolts and the nuts removed, we should then be able to lift up the intake manifold away from the engine. Now we do want to be careful, we don't just want to yank it up because there is more than likely going to be a couple of connectors that we need to disconnect. But yeah, it just seems to be free. There we are then, that is the intake manifold now removed. And if we take a look in here, the swirl flaps themselves have already been removed. They've either been removed or they've all been ingested by the engine, which I think is highly unlikely. So I guess what a previous owner has decided to do is remove the swirl flaps and then just unscrew the flap and remove the rod from the flaps themselves, and then just, you know, put the rest of the swirl flap and the existing rod back in its place without putting the blanks in place, which is an option. But yeah, I kind of thought this might have been the case because I feel like some of the intake manifold bolts were over torqued, and yeah, like some of the nuts kind of looked new, so it kind of led me to believe that this thing has been off before, which would make sense because, you know, the engine has covered 205,000 miles, and these swirl flaps, they would more than likely have failed in that time if they had not already been replaced. So yeah, it's not a total loss. I will be removing this all anyway, and this vacuum section, I believe, and then, you know, fill in the blanks. And one of the reasons that I wanted to remove this as well was also to give the entire intake manifold a good clean out, because as you can see, it's completely just full of carbon. So yeah, we will be getting on to doing that today as well. And I guess we'll go ahead and have a look at the intake ports themselves now as well. Okay, so if you have a look at the intake ports, you can see they are pretty clogged up with carbon. Definitely seen worse though, if I'm honest. But yeah, we are going to be cleaning them out as well before this intake manifold goes back on. But yeah, here's how we're looking. So it's time to start stripping down the intake manifold itself then. So I'll remove this vacuum controller here. That should slide out. And we can go ahead and remove this. It's held in by 2 T20 screws. You can pull this off of the rod. There we are. Now the rod itself should be able to be removed. There we are. Now we'll go ahead and remove all of the swirl flaps, or should I say what's left of them. Yeah, so they've just completely removed the rod from this, and yeah, just put this back in its place. Yeah, you can see the rod's removed. It's ready for the bin though. We will also go ahead and remove the map sensor as well. Just held in by a 10mm bolt. So yeah, this is completely covered in carbon. It's crazy to believe this thing can even register anything. Oh well, we'll be giving it a clean up anyway. Now all we need to do is remove all of the gaskets, and then this thing will be ready for cleaning. And there's also the Egr gasket as well. There we are. And now this thing is completely stripped down and it's ready for cleaning. Okay, so I've actually went ahead and gave the intake manifold a good deep thorough clean inside and out. Looking so much better now. I'd highly recommend you do the same when you are removing your intake manifold, because there is a very good chance that this thing will be very full of carbon. So yeah, it's best to remove that if possible. But now then, it's time to start installing both our new gaskets and also the blanks as well, the swirl flap blanks. So we'll go ahead and start installing our blanks first, and this is what they look like if you have never seen one before. So essentially it just goes into the same slot where the swirl flap went into, and we have an O-ring of course just to seal it. So I'll go ahead and slide that on, and we can put this into position. And these are then secured with our original screws, those T20 screws. And there we are then, so it'll look something a little like that. I'm going to go ahead and install all 4 of the blanks, and then we'll go ahead and start installing the new gaskets. There we are then, there's all 4 of the swirl flap blanks now in place. I've tightened down all of the screws as well. It's time to start installing our new gaskets. Very easy to install. They just drop into place. There we are then, that's all 8 gaskets replaced, and I'm actually also going to replace the Egr gasket as well, which is just this thing here. And again, just drop it in place. And there we are, job done. And as you can see, I've also went ahead and cleaned the map sensor as well, so I can also reinstall this back onto the intake manifold. And there we are then, that is the map sensor reinstalled. So that is the intake manifold now complete. It's time to start reinstalling it back onto the car. Oh, just a quick one, you're probably wondering what I've done with the vacuum hose, because we don't have the vacuum controller on there anymore. All I've done is just inserted a screw into the end. Now bear in mind, this will need to be mapped out. you will need to remove this from the software, essentially the whole swirl flap system, because you will have an error code because obviously it's not plugged into anything. Okay, so we have the intake manifold back into place. I'm going to go ahead and torque down all of the bolts and the nuts. Now the bolts themselves, they're only M6 bolts, so you just need to torque them down to 10 Newton meters. And then the nuts on the studs, they are M7, so they need to be torqued down to 15 Newton meters. So I'll go ahead and torque down the bolts first. And now we'll go ahead and torque down the nuts. So I've torqued down all of the bolts and all of the nuts. Now I'm just going to reinstall everything in its place, and then I'll check in with you when I'm done. Okay then, so as you can see, intake manifold is now back in place. I'm actually going to go ahead and fire this thing up before I go ahead and put all the trim pieces back and everything, just to make sure we don't have any vacuum leaks or anything. But yeah, let's get this thing fired up now. And as you can see, everything is now back together, and that is the swirl flap delete job done. Okay then, so that is the swirl flap delete on my BMW E46 with the M47 engine now complete. I hope this video has been helpful. I have tried to show as much as possible. So yeah, I hope it has been easy enough to follow along. I hope you guys have enjoyed watching. Please remember to give this video a like, leave a comment down below, subscribe if you have not already done so, and I will see you all in that next one. Peace!